You want to make some picks on your favorite sports? Check out Underdog's Fantasy Pick'em game, where you can pick higher or lower on between 2 to 8 players and can win up to 325 times your entry by using code Niners when you sign up, and you'll get $1,000 bonus cash and a free pick.
From the alley-oop to Kezar to the glory days at the stick. From who's got it better than us to brick by brick. It's always the 49ers way, from off-season to game day. Yeah, we talk back. It's the 49ers Cutback.
It's 49ers Cutback podcast time. Welcome to the show, everyone. I want to talk about linebackers, potential linebacker targets for the 49ers in the draft, because who knows what's going to happen with Dre Greenlaw. I think everyone is hoping that Dre Greenlaw is going to be back. Robert Saleh is adamant about Dre Greenlaw being back with the 49ers, but there's also the contrary reports. Matt Barrows reports that potentially he's interested in running his own shop. He wants to go to his own team the way that Azeez Al-Shaair has done, and potentially put a spot for himself, make a name for himself, and not kind of live in Fred Warner's shadow. I don't know if that's the case, because I don't really think that that's how people perceive it in San Francisco. People perceive it that they are a dynamic duo, that they make each other better, that Dre Greenlaw is a big reason why the 49ers defense is so good. But there's always the chance that he could feel that way, or just that a team's ready to open up their pocketbook and give Dre Greenlaw a large amount of money to move in their direction. And the 49ers, it wouldn't just be replacing a starting and really a integral piece of their linebacker core and defense in Dre Greenlaw, but also rebuilding a linebacker group that is pretty picked over. It's not a position the 49ers have neglected. They've continually invested draft capital in linebacker. Just last year, they drafted Tatum Bethune. The year before, they drafted D. Winters and Jalen Graham. Now, these are late-round picks, but they've had success with late-round picks. Dre Greenlaw, fifth-round pick. You look at Azeez Al-Shaair, he was undrafted free agent. Even a player that had been a part of a rotation in Demetrius Flannigan-Fowles was an undrafted free agent. They have continually been able to develop linebackers, whether that was under Robert Saleh, DeMeco Ryans, or Johnny Hollins just being the overall linebacker coach. They've consistently produced good linebackers. But now you look at the cupboard, Demetrius Flannigan-Fowles was just released yesterday and a month early from when he would have become a free agent. It was a procedural move, something the 49ers decided to do, maybe give him a better opportunity to get a jump start on free agency and potentially land somewhere. Maybe they're doing him a solid in that way. We don't know exactly why, but they did move on. But when you look at the 49ers roster, they're planning on tendering Jalen Graham with an exclusive rights free agent, designation, a new contract, which means he'll be back. So you'll have Fred Warner, D. Winters, Jalen Graham, and Tatum Bethune. So you got some room to really bring on some guys. And if Dre comes back, then your linebacker core is feeling a lot more comfortable. Fred's at Mike. You got Dre at will, and then D. Winters could play Sam the way he did last year. You could probably put him at some will when you want to give Dre extra breaks. So you're pretty good there. I still think you need to improve the depth, but it would change the way you go about linebacker. Because if Dre leaves, you need to hit linebacker either in free agency or you need to hit linebacker in the draft, and probably both. But it becomes more of a pressing need. If you go to the draft day and you don't have a linebacker that you feel comfortable stepping in, besides just D. Winters, who hasn't been great against the run, really good in coverage, really good, but hasn't been great when it comes to stopping the run, you are going to have to find somebody that can play the position in the draft. And that might mean spending a little bit more than you want. So we're going to talk about guys early in the draft, potentially, that the 49ers could target. Some of the big dogs, the best linebackers in college football, game changers as it would be. But we're also going to talk about some of the depth along the way, guys in the second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and maybe even a seventh round guy. So I'm going to kind of jump around to some of the guys I like as I've been evaluating linebackers. that the 49ers could take, because you're not just drafting linebacker to potentially start or to help your starting lineup, but also for depth, guys you can help on special teams and eventually develop into a really good player. So it's going to be a fun one. I'm really looking forward to it. I love breaking down linebackers. It's one of my favorite positions to break down. It's just there's a lot of variety and a lot of different guys that really jump off the screen and can make an impact. And some guys are extreme 49er fits and some guys aren't. But nevertheless, it's going to be a fun conversation. Please like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Really appreciate it. Listening audio platform, 49ers Cutback on Believe Network. Please give it a 5-star rating. If you are going to bet with Bet Online. Bet Online is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting in 2025. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, Bet Online is your ultimate game day companion. The largest selection of odds on everything from NBA and college basketball to the NHL and UFC, Bet Online continues to be your number one sports betting source. From every three-pointer to hat trick, Bet Online has you covered with odds, stats, and more for every game, every play, and every win. Bet Online, the game starts here. So for linebacker, there are some names at the top of this class that are phenomenal. And I have started doing some of my linebacker breakdowns on Patreon. So you can find linebacker breakdowns where I get real in depth on each player. I'm going to give you the high notes on this one, talk about their fits. But if you want a more extensive breakdown, that's available on 49ers Cutback Patreon. So go check that out. And I'm going to be putting one out actually about Jihad Campbell here pretty soon. So in the next few days, I'm going to have one out about Jihad Campbell. You could go check that out. But I've been breaking down my favorite players recently, so it's been a lot of fun. And some of these guys are definitely going to make that list. Now, probably the most polarizing and the player that I get asked the most about has got to be Jaylen Walker, the linebacker from Georgia. And the guy's just a physical specimen. And when you're talking about a guy that flies around and makes plays, he's definitely that guy. And that's why there's a range that people have been putting out there about where Jaylen Walker could go. I've seen him go as early as 8 and as late as the second round and pick 45, depending on whose mock draft it is and how they feel he fits. Because there are certain things about him that jump off the screen that fit in certain parameters. Number one, the dude's an absolute monster rushing the passer, but he's a off-ball linebacker as well. This used to not be a real problem when you were talking about 3-4 defenses. This would be an outside linebacker in a 3-4 defense that would walk up to the line of scrimmage and pass rush a lot, but could also play in space and cover when needed. That's what Jaylen Walker's built for. He's built for a 3-4 defense. But we've seen so many teams go to more of a hybrid outside defensive end that's a little bit smaller, more of a linebacker type. You look at Micah Parsons, I think he's the prototype for that. And that's what you're really getting from Jaylen Walker is that type of player, more of a Micah Parsons type player. Micah Parsons, pretty good linebacker. I remember breaking him down, and I thought he was a really talented guy coming out of college as an off-ball linebacker. But then when he came onto the line of scrimmage, he was even more dynamic, being able to get after the quarterback. And so I think that's kind of the position that Jaylen Walker finds himself in. He's going to probably run a 4.5 40 and be absolutely explosive coming off the edge. He had 6.5 sacks last year, and he was able to make 61 tackles. And he's a fun player. You know, he's got pretty good size at 6'2", 245. Not elite size for a linebacker, but really good. I mean, you look at like a guy like Fred Warner, he's probably rolling around 235 just to show you how big Jaylen Walker is. Now, if you're looking for a guy that's going to bring pressure off the edge, a little undersized where they want most guys over 250 and then love them closer to 260. But when you're talking about an elite first step and some of the things he does, it just makes sense. So he's a guy that can do it pretty well in that department. Now, I think that he's getting better and better as an off-ball linebacker. And that's one of the keys is the 49ers need a guy that can play off-ball linebacker. And I think he could be developmental, a guy that gets better and better because of his natural aggressiveness, also his natural abilities to get downhill and make plays. My question is, do the 49ers, are they able to use his full skill set? Because I think he does need to be a guy that brings pressure off the edge. And with the wide 9, they could do that, right? And they do go to some 5-man sets where he could walk up along the line of scrimmage, so that's possible. and I am always open to a team opening up a position or creating a position within their defense to use the skill set. So if you have a vision for it, it could definitely work. So I like Jaylen Walker. I think he's a really talented player. He's, I think, a lot more impressive off the edge than he is as an off-ball linebacker, which I think he's still pretty good at. But I don't know if the 49ers will be willing to go there at 11, and I don't think he's going to be there at 43. So that's the question mark. So when people bring him up, if you see him in the light of an edge rusher, then 11, there's a lot of value there. If you don't see him and you see him as an off-ball linebacker, it might be too expensive. So that's something to remember, unless you think he could step in right off the bat and play Dre Greenlaw's position. I don't think I see that. I think I see a guy that, needs to get a little bit better when it comes to playing linebacker. But, I mean, the dude has got real skills when it comes to rushing the passer. I like him a lot. He does a good job with his pad level and is really good at maintaining position when he's going against the run game. So it was something that I liked. I think that the off-ball linebacker part is the part that I have a little bit of hesitation with, because he doesn't diagnose and get downhill as quickly as you'd always want. When he sees it, he gets downhill, in a hiccup. Boom, he's on you. But, the other parts, I don't know. And so I think that there's still some rawness when it comes to his coverage skills. He needs to get better when it comes to his man coverage for sure. And so how quickly will he translate to will linebacker? I think that's a question mark. So I like Jaylen Walker. I just don't think the 49ers can go Jaylen Walker at 11. Now, for some reason, he was sitting there at 43. I think it would be a real conversation for the San Francisco 49ers to potentially go with Jaylen Walker. So good player. But I want to kind of go to the next guy, and this is the guy right now that I believe is the best off-ball linebacker in the draft. Just watching him on film, he flies around, he's big, he's physical, and that's Jihad Campbell, 6'3", 244. He's probably going to run a 4.5 40 as well, just like Jaylen Walker. Freaky athlete, freaky size, just like Jaylen Walker. I mean, these dudes are just different. Campbell had 5 sacks. Walker had 6.5. Campbell had 2 forced fumbles. He had 119 tackles, just to show you the difference. And I know Jaylen Walker played at Georgia, and there's a lot of really good football players there, but he made, about half the tackles that Jihad Campbell did. And Campbell had 55 solo tackles. Dude flies around. He's everywhere that he's supposed to be. I mean, he just gets downhill and he makes plays. And he was one of my favorite watches on film. And I was just watching him recently, and it was like, this is a bad man. And you don't normally, when you're thinking 49er needs, you're usually starting defensive line and offensive line. But if Dre Greenlaw did move on, I think Jihad Campbell is a real option, and you might have to go ahead and put him in there and see what he could do. Because, this dude's got that ability to step in day one and make an impact on your football team. He's that good. But you would be investing a high draft pick in him. Now, I just saw a mock draft from Joe Klatt. He said that Jihad Campbell's going to go in the first round. So there's a chance he's just not going to be available for the 49ers. If he goes in the mid-20s, then he's out of their reach. But there could be the opportunity for him to be there at 43. And if he is, I think it's a serious consideration. And I know it's not defensive tackle. I know it's not offensive line. But it could be a real need. And this could be an investment that really pays off for the 49ers, not just this year, but next year. Because let's say you do bring Dre Greenlaw back. You're going to have a question mark about Dre Greenlaw the year after, or the year after that when he hits free agency again, minus them locking him up to a long-term deal. And Jihad Campbell, he's that guy, right? He's got that attitude. He's fierce. He makes plays. The explosive first step is there, whether he's coming off the edge or he's reading what the offense is doing in the run game, getting downhill and making tackles. He does a very good job. There are some really good plays to watch, what he does, whether it's blitzing or rushing off the edge or even him in space and coverage. He does a really good job. He has great coverage instincts, and this is a guy that's a converted edge player. So he started out as an edge guy and has developed into an off-ball linebacker, and I think he's further along in his development than Jaylen Walker, and so he's made a lot of really good plays, and he's had great route recognition. When you're in zone coverage and you're getting into your drops, you have to make sure you can recognize those routes, and he's really good about it, and that's going to help him. He also has a really good tackling percentage. So he does not miss tackles, only 5.5% missed tackle rate in 2024. So you're talking about a guy that makes tackles for your team. That's one of the things that you like about Dre Greenlaw. This guy kind of reminds me of Dre Greenlaw, that big, physical, fast linebacker who's pretty good in coverage, that doesn't miss tackles. That's exactly what you're looking for. He also can play every single linebacker position. He's played Mike, he's played Will, he's played on the edge. And so he's got a lot of ability to do all the things you need. And that's what you need as far as filling a role. What happens if Fred goes down? You need someone that can step in. It might be hard for a young rookie, but as he gets into his sophomore season, it can make a lot of sense. And he's got a really good ability to be a chase linebacker, run guys down. I mean, he's got closing speed for, a guy that's near 250 pounds. I really like him. So the frame, the size, the ability to be able to get into passing lanes is there. He gets downhill. He does a good job. He's still developing a little bit when it comes to his shed technique and getting off of offensive linemen. That's a problem for a lot of linebackers, but there's a lot to like about him. I think he's a little bit more seasoned of a transition than Jaylen Walker is. He's a little bit better of an off-ball linebacker than Jaylen Walker. Both guys are really good off the edge. And so it's really fun to see these guys and what they do. And so he's really cool. I like Jihad Campbell a lot. He's super young. He's only 20 years old. He'll be 22 when the combine starts. And so you're talking about, 21 when the combine starts. You're talking about a young guy that's still developing, but a really talented player. I like Jihad Campbell. And if he's available at 43, I think the 49ers might have to seriously think about it. Now let's go to South Carolina, because it seems like the 49ers like South Carolina players, but I think they're going to like a linebacker from South Carolina as well. And that's Demetrius Knight. A dude is, physical. If you're watching his film, you're going to see a very physical player, a guy that throws his whole body out there and makes contact with players. I liked him. I thought his film stood out at 6'2", 245, another big physical, right? All the guys we've talked about so far, the three guys are all 6'2", around 245 pounds. Impressive athletes. Now, he's probably not going to run as fast as Jaylen Walker or Jihad Campbell. Those guys are the elite of the elite when it comes to linebackers at their size running. But we'll see what Demetrius Knight does at the combine. But he's going to put up a pretty good number. He's still very fast. He can chase you down. So he is a run and chase linebacker who can go sideline to sideline. Love seeing that. Last year, he had 2 sacks, 3 forced fumbles, 82 tackles. 57 of them were solo. So he played pretty well last year for South Carolina, and he had transferred in. So he got 1 year at South Carolina to prove what he could do, and he did a really good job in his opportunities to play there. So Demetrius Knight is a fun player. When you're talking about a guy that goes downhill and pulls the trigger in an instant, he's one of those guys, comes downhill, will shoot a gap and light you up in the backfield. He's a disruptive player. 49ers love disruptive linebackers and guys who go off instinct and don't hesitate when they've made a decision. He's one of those guys. He does have natural instincts when it comes to blitzer. And that's why the top 3 guys are all impactful, because they can come from the second level and make plays, whether they're blitzing or come up out on the outside as a rusher. And he does a pretty good job. Now, one thing that I loved about him was, if you want bone-crushing hits, you're going to get bone-crushing hits. He absolutely lights people up around the line of scrimmage, and he's really impressive when it comes to his physicality. He does show some ability in zone coverage. I would say there still needs to be a lot of development when it comes to reading route concepts. This is where you get to step down, especially from Jihad Campbell. There is the ability there, but right now we haven't seen him put it all together. That's something he needs to get a little bit better about, especially when you're talking about reading the quarterback's eyes and being able to jump on underneath routes. Right now, it's a little slow. So sometimes he gets into his drop and he doesn't see those early checkdowns, and it takes him a little bit longer to respond than other. But I think he could get a little bit better at that. But he does have a good ability when he's playing downhill to stack and shed. That means getting rid of that offensive lineman. Stack him up, shed him, and make the play. He shows the physicality and the strength, leverage to be able to do that. So I like him a lot. I do think he could help you on special teams, especially early. So when you're talking now with, getting into the second, third probably third round, late second, early third. This is kind of where his hotbed is going to be potentially for him to be able to go. And I think that he's got the natural leadership qualities to be able to help your football team. There's still plenty of stuff he needs to get better at. Sometimes he's a little bit, out of sorts with some things, and sometimes he's got a little bit tight hips, that make it a little bit difficult when he's in his drops and when he's, being able to turn and run or even drive on a football, which we talked about a little bit earlier. And I think that there could be a problem when it comes to man coverage with him covering in space compared to the former two guys we talked about who have all the athleticism and the flexible hips to be able to turn and run with some of the more athletic, speedy running backs in the league. I think that could be a little bit of a problem when it comes to Demetrius. So I think he's a good player. He's a fun player, Demetrius Knight out of South Carolina. And I think he would kind of hit in that area. So talented guy, third round pick, I think would be a hotbed for him. And I think the 49ers would love having another physically imposing player. The questions are, do they think he could develop enough when it comes to coverage? But he could step in day one and play, Sam linebacker. You're out there not in nickel packages, so you're playing mainly against base sets and run plays. Less opportunities for him to get beat in the pass and then develop a lot like they did with Tatum Bethune last year. I would just say that Knight's a more physically imposing player right now and a little bit further along in his development than Tatum Bethune was last year, especially when it comes to coverage. So quickly, I want to talk to you about Underdog Fantasy. If you sign up for Underdog Fantasy, click the link in the description section and download the app. You use the promo code Niners. You can get up to $1,000 in free bonus cash and a free pick playing the higher lower game. So sign up. It's a lot of fun. They have NHL. They have NBA, college basketball, all those things you can play higher lower on. You can play streaks, and it's a lot of fun. So just sign up, use the promo code Niners, and you could get $1,000 bonus cash and a free pick from Underdog Fantasy. But let's get right back to the linebacker group because there's still a lot of really talented players, and I haven't touched on very many at all. Another guy that I really like potentially for the 49ers, and they've met with him, so it's one of the guys I want to talk about. And full transparency, I'm not going to be able to talk about all the linebackers in this episode. I'm going to have to come back and talk about a lot of guys. So if you have a linebacker that I don't touch on in this episode, make sure to send me the name, and hey, I'll have a follow-up episode for sure because there are definitely more linebackers for them to be able to talk about. But I want to talk about Chris Paul Jr. out of Ole Miss. And I watched his film when he was at Oklahoma. Then I watched him at Ole Miss. And you talk about a guy that flies around and makes plays. It is definitely Chris Paul. He's also a very good tackler. He doesn't miss a lot of tackles. We talked about earlier, Jihad Campbell not missing tackles. Well, Chris Paul's right behind him. He misses 7% of his tackles. So a very short tackler, which I love. He had 3.5 sacks, really good blitzer. So he is able to find his way through 86 tackles, 48 solo tackles. Talented guy, 6'1", 235, more of the 49ers mold of that quick athletic linebacker in space. And that's definitely something he does well. When you're talking about size and speed, he's not going to jump off the chart with anything like that, but he's got the ability. And you look at his arm length, and that's going to be scary for a lot of football teams. He's got short arms at 30 1/8. Will that hurt him when he needs to stack and shed? Will he be able to stack and shed against offensive line? Maybe not as good as you would like. So he's going to have to use other ways. He's going to have to rip, and he's going to have to avoid, and he's going to have to do different things and be quicker with what he sees with his eyes and trust it a little bit more. So those are things to take into account. But you're talking about a third-round linebacker here. So there are some things that are definitely not going to be perfect, or he would be higher up because of his instincts and the way that he plays. Because he does have really good instincts and recognition skills. He definitely is a guy that can identify what is coming from the blocking scheme and then be able to be in the right position to make a play. He is a really good tackler, textbook tackling technique. That's why he doesn't miss very many. He's got a good first step. Once he reads the play, he's got a closing burst to get downhill and make the tackle in the backfield. When you're talking about his zone coverage, he's good. He does a good job. He's got a good natural feel, and he also has a very fluid back pedal. So you're talking about a guy that feels comfortable in drops, which isn't always good for a linebacker. Linebackers are more comfortable going forward. he's comfortable going forward and going backwards, which makes him a natural, linebacker in the NFL and potential will linebacker. So that's exactly what you have to do. He's also very intelligent, a quick processor, and according to his coaches, he picks up on things that the offense does and is able to kind of point those out to his teammates, which is huge. He's able to keep his balance and use leverage to maintain gap integrity against zone runs, which is important, especially when you're going to play against teams like Sean McVay and these zone schemes. So he's got the mentality for it. He's a big-time player. I like Chris Paul. I think he would help right away on special teams and could end up stepping into a linebacker 3 role. If you needed him early on, he could definitely come in there and do it. If D. Winters is going over to Will, then he could do it. So this is a young developmental guy, that could make an impact for the 49ers. And I like him. I think he's a talented guy. And they met with him, so they have some interest in him as well. And in the 3rd round, he could be a really good spot. Maybe you hit him, at 75 or 99 potentially, and you get a linebacker that you feel comfortable developing. And who knows what he could be, but he's talented. He's not as good as the top 2 guys that we talked about, but he's pretty darn solid. And, that's what I like to see. So there's a couple of guys in here that I'm not going to talk about at this one, but I want to bring up because I'm definitely going to have to get to him on another episode. Barrett Carter, linebacker from Clemson. I definitely want to break him down. Carson Schwessinger, which I know a lot of people have been talking to me about UCLA, dynamic season, and I have been getting into his film as well. He's somebody that I definitely want to break down. But a guy that I do like that I wanted to break down in this episode is Jeffrey Bosa, linebacker from Oregon. And 6'2", 235 is a fun watch. He's not as athletic as the guys that I talked about earlier. I think that when you're talking about foot speed, closing time, like those things are a little bit lower. That's why Jeffrey Bosa, you're talking, 4th round, 5th round pick, potentially that you could go ahead and pick him up. So he's a mid-round guy, but he's got a lot of ability, and he's got the good prototypical 49er size, and so I think he's going to be able to fit. But what I really liked about Jeffrey Bosa was the instincts. I mean, the guy can process things very quickly and get where he needs to be, but he also communicates very well with his teammates. You could see him as a field general communicating with his teammates. He was a former safety, so that fits what the 49ers do when you're talking about players that they like at linebacker, those guys who are former safeties that really are able to help in coverage, right? Fred Warner, former safety. Azeez Al-Shire, former safety. Demetrius Flannigan-Fowles, former safety. Jalen Graham, former safety. Like, this is what they do. These are the type of players they get. So this is why I wanted to talk about him in this episode because, it does make sense. He's a guy that gets downhill quickly, but has plus coverage skills. He's one of the better coverage linebackers. I know that there's going to be a lot when it comes to his athleticism, but his natural instincts definitely kick in. And so he's going to be able to do some things there. I love his ability to recognize route concepts because of his safety ability. And I think he's better than some about recognizing what those are in zone coverage. It does a pretty good job reading, through the quarterback's eyes and through the progression. He does a good job. He's also a good blitzer. He does good against zone run schemes because he's very stack and flow. Very down, very patient with his reads, does a good job. So I'm a fan of what he does. He'll also help on special teams. He's a good player. There's of course things that, that you don't like. It's not one of those guys that's very physical in nature where the guys we talked about before are very physical at the point of attack, kind of knock you back with that initial contact. That's not what he does. He's more of a guy that's an avoidance. And patient and finding his window and getting downhill. There's a place for both in the NFL. He needs to continue to get a little bit better when you're talking about his frame. He needs to put on more strength, not so much more size, but more strength to be able to do some of the things you need to do at linebacker and get out away from offensive linemen, be able to shed those blocks. So, he's definitely got to get better at that. I think he's got to get better at tackling where he's not going through a player with consistent feet, but he's more of a pull down, bring somebody to the ground type guy. So Jeffrey Bosa is fun when you get to like the 4th, 5th round. I think if he was sitting there in the 5th round, you would definitely be pumped, or into the 4th round, one of those comp picks for the 49ers. I think you would really like one of those. Now, because it's been requested to me, I'm going to talk about Jay Higgins a little bit. So he's one of the guys that I'm going to hit. Linebacker out of Iowa, 6'2", 232. You're talking about less physically gifted than the guys we've talked about. The guys we talked about already, tremendous talents, athletic all over the place. Higgins is not that. But what Higgins lacks in athleticism, he makes up for in a lot of other areas. He's very instinctive. He's got a sideline to sideline motor. He just never quits. He goes, and he's running around trying to make plays. And he's one of those guys that, somebody's slowing someone up, he's going to get there and make the tackle. I've seen him finish off a lot of ball carriers. He's really good at tackling. He's got the proper technique. And so what you didn't get from Jeffrey Bosa, you're getting from Higgins. He did a really good job there. He showed the ability to cover in space. The athleticism could be something that he is a little bit risky when you're talking about going against the more athletic tight ends or running backs in coverage, but that's a problem for a lot of guys. So he does show the ability to play a will linebacker in the NFL because he could possibly play in coverage against the nickel because he's got the natural instincts in coverage. So that's what you're looking for, a guy that can play all three downs at linebacker. He's one of those guys. Now, he's stout at the point of attack, and he wins when it comes to stuffing plays on the inside, and he's very talented. I like that guy. I think he's going to be a good special teams player early that's able to use his football IQ to eventually get on the field and play really well when you're talking about a linebacker that can be consistent. He's going to do things right. That's what I like about him. It's not that he's going to do anything that's going to blow your mind, not any of these plays that are just absolutely insane. He uses great speed or great size or great strength. No, it's going to be intelligence. It's going to be football IQ. It's going to be being in the right place at the right time and never stopping, using that motor to be able to get there. And so, his main weaknesses are going to be his size. It's going to be his speed and athleticism. Those are the things that are really going to, hurt him a little bit. So that could limit his ability to recover if he gets caught off guard, misses on a misdirection or a counter. He's not going to have the makeup speed to be able to do that. He also wasn't a great blitzer. So if you're looking for that from your linebacker, that might be something, that you don't go with. So there's plenty of linebackers to still talk about. But I'm going to talk about one more because there's a guy that's been on my radar. And if you've made it till the end, I want you to hear about this guy. And he just jumps off the screen for me. He's one of those guys. It's going to be a late round pick. Right now, a lot of people have him undrafted. I think he's a late round guy. I took him in my mock draft, the other day, which, if you want to check out that mock draft, it's getting a lot of attention. Go check it out. It was a lot of fun. And yeah, I did some things that people didn't like. I did some things that people liked. And that's a lot of fun. It's a lot about the conversation. I like to talk about players maybe people don't talk about. So that's why I take them. But I want to talk about a small school guy out of Memphis, and that's Chandler Martin. And Chandler Martin, I've seen a tweet about Chandler Martin, and I thought, hey, let's go check this guy out. Sometimes I like to see those little references. And he's not going to wow you with size. He's 6 foot, 215 pounds, undersized. But this dude absolutely packs a punch. And he just looks faster. So it's estimated he's going to run a 4.6 40 at the combine, or he's not even invited to the combine. He's going to run a 4.6 40 at his pro day. This guy looks a lot faster on film. He's one of my favorite watches right now. I've really enjoyed watching what he did. And you're talking about attitude, physicality. He plays a lot bigger than 6 foot, 215. So he had 7 sacks this season and 1 forced fumble, 111 tackles, 59 solo tackles. A really good job. So you're talking, when you're talking physical attributes, size, length, all that, it's not going to be good. When you're talking about a nose for the football, it's going to be extremely good. And that's what I loved about him. It was instincts off the charts. He would see a play, he would diagnose, he would get downhill, he'd make a play. And a lot of times he didn't even have to shed blocks because he was so quick getting downhill, he avoided the offensive lineman altogether. But he's very physical at the point of attack. He's a good tackler. I think that there are a lot of developmental instincts I like about him. And part of the reason I wanted to bring him up is because you've got to hit on linebackers in this draft, potentially for depth. You get cheaper guys. And I think that he could be a depth piece of the 49ers grab to potentially develop, because I think he's going to be a home run on special teams. So you draft him to fill out your linebacker room. He comes in, he helps you on special teams, and he develops because he's got a natural instinct and nose for the football. So to me, this would be a awesome seventh round pick, even an undrafted free agent, but I think I would hit him in the seventh round. If he's there at 255 or even 228, go ahead and grab him. I think he could be an instinctual player that helps you on special teams and eventually could work his way into a starting position, whether that's Sam or Will linebacker. I think there's some development that needs to happen in coverage, but he's a guy that makes plays on the football. He's a guy that's always around the football, and I like that. So there's plenty of guys I could talk about still in this episode, but I'm going to save those for another because there are plenty of guys to break down. This is a long process. We haven't even got to the combine yet, but I wanted to talk about some of the guys that are on the 49ers radar that fit what the 49ers do and maybe give some clarity on who we thought Jaylen Walker was compared to who like Jihad Campbell was and if they make sense for the 49ers. So let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Which linebacker do you like the most? Do you think Jaylen Walker makes sense for the 49ers at 11? I'm curious about that. Would you take a linebacker in the first 2 rounds, or do we wait? Go with a Demetrius Knight or a Chris Paul or a Jeffrey Bosa, somebody later on in the draft. I'm really curious what you have to say. Also, if there's more linebackers, like I said, bring them up in the comment section so I could get to them. I knew I had a full list, and I wasn't going to be able to get to all of them today, but I will definitely reapproach this situation and go over these linebackers again, because until we know about Dre Greenlaw, it's a real need. And even when we do know about Dre Greenlaw, there's still a need for 49ers to add a linebacker in the draft. So could be interesting. Please like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Listening audio platform, 49ers Cutback on Believe Network. Please give it a 5-star rating. This episode is brought to you by Bet Online. The game starts here. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Until then, stay safe. Remember, the right way is always the 49ers way.